this conversation we're about to have. So if you are planning to make any donations in church, maybe even this Sunday, you will have to do so either through mobile money or checks. Should you think of blessing the bishop with amounts more than 50,000 shillings, you will need an acknowledgement letter. This, the Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops says, will aid in the fight against corruption. The clergy have launched a 6-month campaign against what they term as tremendous corruption that has imprisoned our hearts, families, and indeed the entire society. The declaration was made during the National Prayer Day held at Subukia Shrine in the Diocese of Nakuru, where the clergy came up with 7 proposals to tame corruption in church. Here are some of them. First, contributions to fundraisers in the churches will be done by mobile money, transfer, or preferably by check. Keep an open declaration of lists and accounts of projects and fundraising initiatives that can be accessed by the public. Any gift to a religious leader exceeding 50,000 shillings should be declared and accompanied by a letter of acknowledgement. Further, the churches will not be used as political platforms. Political speeches shall not be allowed at all within the liturgical celebrations. There will be a corruption complaints desk as well to keep record of reports of corruption from the public. And finally, for the next 6 months, the clergy will renew their baptismal promises in all our churches on Sundays using the specific formula that highlights the rejection of the evil of corruption. Well, joining me tonight is Archbishop Anthony Muheria from Nyeri Diocese.
Yes.
Very good to see you.
Thank you.
So I've outlined most of those proposals that you made.
Yes.
How practical are they?
I think this comes from a background that, as you know, the Catholic Church has made many statements in the past years. The last one made, which was very sharp, was in April this year, in which, during the meeting of the bishops, it highlighted just how bad the corruption has reached. In every single statement the bishops have made, they always underline that issue of corruption. So the desire was to look for a way which will really address the corruption from, first, an authoritative platform as church, and secondly, in a way that will heal what is really a rot of the heart. As you can imagine, there's been a lot of talk about imprisonment or people, the judicial system, but when you reflect and you think, if we have as many people who are our systems as efficient in jail, that will not kill corruption. Corruption is something deeper. And so the way the Catholic bishops have taken is to awaken the conscience, is to address down up rather than up down, to address the consciences of Christians, of our faithful, but of any God-fearing and believer, so that we start healing from within. So those 7 kind of guidelines or touchlines that the bishop have made are first to try and bring back and to ensure that integrity in the church is ascertained as a way we have to look in our own housekeeping first before we can even go out. So I think they're very practical. And there is no doubt that we will see the fruits of those indications that the bishops have given.
So it's the implementation part of it that I'm questioning, Bishop, because how then do you separate from the genuine givers who don't want to go through the tedious process of writing checks and having money transfer?
Yes, I think the 2 things here. First is the contribution that we make at church, which is the tzedakah, the ordinary thing, tzedakah, that obviously goes in the normal way that we do, and that I think is in the context of what we say the liturgy. The other, and this I think is where we are specifically addressing the issue of possible corruption or corrupt ways creeping into the systems, is in fundraisers, for example, or big projects that the church has. And in these areas, we really want to make sure that, and this is not just something for the Catholic Church, it's something international in terms of transparency. We want to make sure that there is a trail of all transactions that reach the church that can be traced backwards and also traced forwards in how we are accountable to what we receive. So I think that is quite practical in my view. So the other way is to, in the big contributions, is not only for security, but it's very difficult to really know the source of huge amounts of cash. So in a way to try to start taming that and to set, you may say, trail, to set pace, we feel that we should be able, we have enough means of receiving those contributions through ways that are traceable, and that is money transfer, cash in checks given to us, and of course M-Pesa.
But you can only trace it at your end when the contribution is done. Will you follow it through? Say I give a check of 1 million shillings. Will you come and find out whether I got that from a loan, whether I got that from a business? How do you follow it through?
Yes, it's true. We as church cannot do the policing or the investigative part of all those contributions. And as I've said in a number of interviews, it's very difficult to distinguish what is clean cash and what is dirty cash or soiled or funds, whether they be by cash, whether they be by check. And so that also goes back to the issue of conscience, that the money that comes, whether big or small, in whatever amounts, the giver and the donor is the one who has we give the honors of him looking whether it is illicit money, whether it's money that is worth giving to God, and at the same time that its source is legitimate. We can't do the policing. So, but for anyone who would want to know whether this money that has come through the right source, you'll be able to trace it back. And this is for any other agency that has been given that mandate. And it's good always to distinguish. It's not the amounts we're speaking about. Small amounts can also be soiled. I commented the other day too in one of those conversations that big money can be legitimate. Small money can be, God forbid, from a brothel. And that's still not right money, or stolen from the pickpocket in the church and then donated. So I think it's important to keep the conscience at the front, and that we don't act judge or God in trying to determine. But we will make sure that for any source or trace of whether that money is licit, you'll be able to go back in all the transactions back to where it came.
So how did you settle on the 50,000 that has to be declared when it's given to a clergy? Because I could give you 30,000 and it's illicit cash.
In that, I think we want to distinguish. One, we spoke about the donations and the contributions for church and church projects, which of course we said should be done through this means that we are setting out now. We also realize that there are goodwill gifts that a clergy, a priest or a bishop may receive, and it's licit, it's a good thing. However, those amounts, when they become a bit larger, then may seem no longer as a goodwill gift. They may mean maybe they want to compromise, and therefore there is importance to give with the intention of why that is given, so that we too as the recipients are able to be transparent about what we receive, and the person giving that as a gift to me, when he gives, the acknowledgement comes from me. And that acknowledgement can be by simple receipt that says, or by simple letter that comes back. So I think it's quite practical that we are not saying you shouldn't give. We're just saying that when you give me 500,000 without any label of what I should use it for, I think personally, I think there is an issue there to say why.
Fair enough. But what kind of action would the KCCB want to see against corrupt individuals? What is the official position? Because the crime is not a kumbaya moment. It's corruption is a crime.
Yes.
So do you want people forgiven? What position?
No, certainly there's on one hand the legal, that anyone who has done a crime, was committed a crime, should meet the full force of that crime. That is not now. There is here we are not negotiating, nor are we trying to say that we should avoid taking and bring those people to book and to meet in court and to be condemned if they need. But on the other hand, I think we also are a church, and mercy is part of us. So I think it's a conversation that we can continue having, that we should also leave some room to people who actually, through a sense of conversion and desire to change, may want to actually give back what they may have obtained illicitly and illegally. And I think we won't call it mercy, but there is a need of some kind of reprieve also in that. So I do believe that it's a conversation we can have, it's a conversation that can be discussed beyond, but ours is that when a crime is committed, that person, of course, should meet what that crime demands that he be meted with.
So was this declaration inspired by the Deputy President's Harambes in churches?
I'll give a bit of a background. I think the inspiration of the action of the bishops goes back to the visit of Pope Francis here in Kenya.
Yeah.
The greatest critic and the greatest maybe challenge that has been made on Kenyan soil was made by Pope Francis in Kasarani Stadium to the youth, in which he decried the corruption and the tremendous terrible effects it has, both on the corrupt and the person who is corrupted, and the person who takes part in it. And it is from this that the reflection has been going on for a long time in the bishops, and that is where we actually underpinned our April 2019 statement against corruption. That, I think, is a first background. The second, and this has been something that we've been really discussing, is that we need to have a real prophetic moment where we can tag hearts and not just point fingers, to move away from calling criminals or saying and suspicions and what sometimes can even seem like witch hunting, and to start going back to ourselves, to awaken consciences, because it's a monster that the only way to really handle, we must starve it. And we are the ones who must first kill it. And so the prophetic call had in mind to bring back to the sense of any Kenyan, whatever status, equal before God, that I take a commitment. So it wasn't moved by individuals who may, for whatever reason, have been seen to be contributing or not contributing. It is moved on a matter of principle of saying there are other people who also are willing to do the same,
but
and are fearful.
Will you expect him to come with a check?
That, I think,
because he's been giving a lot of contribution.
Yes, I really believe that be he or others will have to comply now with what the church says. And I would want to widen this discussion to just beyond that, because there are a lot of very goodwill persons who have supported the church and churches. Here, of course, I speak of the Catholic Church with a bit of authority, but I believe in many other senses and in many other contexts, there's been a lot of support from individuals for good and with very good intentions. And I think we should be careful not to kill the goodwill of any one of those persons. However, this must be done within a certain rule. It must be done for the right intentions. It must be done with funds that the person in conscience before giving knows that that funds are worth giving to God. Now that the buck stops at the person who is doing the donation.
So listen to this, Bishop. There was a conversation around Rift Valley clergy. And this is what they had to say. Listen to this, then you'll react.
When politicians and our leaders go to various places, they show their support in matters to do with projects and the building of churches. There is one particular group that is seriously blessed and has visited some churches in central Kenya more than 50 times. We can only imagine how many projects we would have finished by now here, even in the South Rift, if we have had half of the visits. So we are also asking them that they should also give us our share, so that we can also develop like other regions.
I saw you smiling. So how do you plan to rope in other churches?
No, I think there are two things I want to address here. One, this initiative of the anti-corruption campaign of the Catholic Church has been pitched precisely so that it goes away from the political discussion of corruption. The political or politicized fight of corruption gets very entangled with many things, and this is the specific sharpness with which the bishops have wished to situate the anti-corruption. In other words, we are not speaking about the political use of funding. We're speaking about the church and the message of purifying the church space, if you wish. And this, allow me just to mention this in that prophetic sign, even though I know you want us to speak a little later about that. But the prophetic sign of the bishops in removing the shoes were specifically coming away from the secular setting and giving a message that this is holy ground.
Yeah.
And this is first and foremost, the church space is holy ground. And we, even as bishops, remove our shoes in order to give God his dignity and to give his honor and respect to him.
Okay.
And that too is the same for the heart.
Okay.
That is sacred ground which has been brought by all these other political interests that are tugging at the same heart. So my reaction therefore to this conversation is that's a conversation that can be taken on the political line, which I would not comment on. What I would say is that all of us are obliged, and I would say out of what we've also benefited from churches, but also out of the sense of wanting to support the initiatives of God, to give something, and with fairness. Now, we shift the responsibility to the individual consciences of the persons. So what those persons may speak, I'll tell them, let's speak to the conscience of those people, of the leaders and others. We are interested that the leaders have fairness. We're interested that the leaders have right intention, and we're interested that the leaders indeed do that in honor of God. When those three are done, I think we are somewhere.
So one other thing that you did was to ban political statements in church. I wanted to listen to what Embu Bishop Paul Kariuki said sometimes back, and then you react to this. Listen.
Deputy President anaambiwa na tanga. Waoni ile kazi anayoifanya kusema hii barabara itengenezwe, tuwekewe maji hapa. Nyuki anafanya kazi, inji anasema nyuki anatangata. Deputy President rea kutangatanga, hakuna shida. Tangatanga ukifanya kazi ya Mungu, ukiwafanyia watu kazi vizuri. Wacha 2022 itafika. Hiyo mnasema gioroweke itafika. Mutaweza kuelewa mkujua.
Should the church endorse any candidates?
No. The church in itself should be non-partisan, and we've always been non-partisan, and I would not want to comment about the context with which this particular clip has been played, but I think part of the prophetic sign, you know, is us bishop who came with our cross and without our feet, without our shoes, bare feet, with a recognition that we want to humble ourselves before God on our behalf and on behalf of all Kenyans and of many believers who in one or another may have made a mistake or a slip, even in terms of corruption. We have assisted some of this misgovernance. So I think there was a lot of sense of penance, a sense of conversion, and we are not pointing to others. I'm not saying Trevor, I'm not saying, we're saying first ourselves. So I think the Subukia Shrine pilgrimage was also a moment of introspection and taking tab that at times our clergy may have sometimes not played as well as they ought. And we are not also saying that we are absolutely corrupt free. This must start with us. And so the sense of a beginning, the sense of a fight that starts with us first taking it upon ourselves is why we knelt in front of the altar. So I think it's important also in this context to understand that from one issue that may have a reason that we make a generalization. In this particular context, there is absolutely no doubt that we are non-partisan, and in this context, we are going out in saying what we've said together in that Subukia declaration.
So very briefly, you've spoken about introspect. The church was very vocal in the year of Moi, the Moi era. The church would speak about elections, graft, poverty, democracy. After that, there's been a lull. How do you think the church is faring today compared to the days of Ndingi Mwananzeki, Cardinal Otunga?
On a number of occasions, I've been asked that question, and I think it is a valid question. On one hand, I think the context is certainly different because of the church was the only voice. Even the media were gagged. It was very difficult even for the media to make to say things as they are. So it was a different context. But I would rather say there is also something that we must also appreciate.
Yeah.
I'll ask you, in all the funerals that have been broadcasted of anyone that has come on media, how many times do we know what was the message of the minister, of the preacher, or the bishop who presided? He gave a homily, he spoke, but our media has many times shifted to be really politically inclined and have, in a way, shut a lot of other messages that would have perhaps helped. That is one thing that we also have recognized. Every time I go to watch the news and I hear there was a funeral somewhere, I actually never end up knowing who was the minister in that funeral, neither what was said. So there is also that part of perhaps we've lost the focus and not wanted to focus on that message of the ministers. However, it's also true that the church could have done a lot more. I don't think we can totally exonerate ourselves from having done more. And here we are. The time is ripe. It's God's time. And we, as a Catholic Church, are coming out. But I do believe the other churches, and we have had a lot of support from other churches, and we would like to welcome them in this move so that we really carry the country together. And not only churches, even other like-minded persons. And that is why we are calling it a prophetic gesture. It's not just initiative. It is that it should talk to all. Anyone who's got a good heart should be ready to be pulled up towards it.
All right. Archbishop Anthony Muheria, thank you so much. From Nyeri Diocese is trying to put the heads and tails of that declaration. Will the clergy return money they think is ill-gotten? Yes or no?
I don't know. It depends. Ill-gotten in terms of their own, or
the money that is brought to you once you realize it's ill-gotten.
You see, the problem is we don't have pH paper to know whether it's ill or not. So if you tell me that it's ill-gotten, I would say don't give it to me. But again, how do I know whether Trevor's of mine is really good money? So I think there is a problem there, but I think it's conscience. And this campaign will certainly bring the hearts back, and we will regain this space that we have been somehow swallowed by this corrupt monster.
Thanks, Archbishop. I'm sure we'll take stock of this conversation again at some point. Anthony Muheria, the
Thank you very much.
Nyeri Diocese, speaking to us there. And that does it for tonight. My name is Trevor Mbija. Always a pleasure having you with us. Enjoy the rest of your viewing. Next week, the gang and Yvonne and everybody else is back. Good night.